Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Ghoulish with me, Max Booth, a host. And today on the program, I am talking to my pal, Scott Wampler, who is one half of a really fun podcast called The Kingcast, which is a podcast dedicated to discussing Stephen King film adaptations with really fun, famous, exciting guests. He's had Elijah Wood on, he's had Mike Flanagan, the list goes on. It's not just those two, but other folks as well. I highly recommend you check out the Kingcast on any place you can listen to podcasts. Go leave them a review. And hey, while you're doing that, leave Ghoulish a review. We could also use reviews. Everybody could use reviews. Why? Because we're desperate people. On this episode of Ghoulish, Scott and I are talking about an excellent movie called Session 9. If you have not seen Session 9, I do not recommend you listen to this episode because we'll just getting right into the guts of it. We'll spoiling everything. So if you haven't seen Session 9 and you are okay with the movie being spoiled, I guess it's okay to listen, but I do recommend you go watch that movie before you listen to this. It's a great movie. Highly recommended. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Go watch Session 9 and then listen to this episode of Ghoulish about Session 9. That was painful. I asked you to come on this podcast, Scott, and you suggested we talk about Session 9. Why don't you tell me why?
Well, anytime somebody asks me if I want to have a conversation about something horror related, I'm going to find a way to bring it back to Session 9, which is like a movie that I've been beating the drum for Jesus, going on 20 years now. It's one of my favorite movies ever made, or favorite horror movies ever made. I think it is wildly undervalued, and there's so much to talk about with Session 9, just in terms of like the backstory that brought Brad Anderson to make it, and the fact that they actually filmed in that fucking building, and the fact that David Caruso, who is an actor I'm not usually a fan of, kills it in that role, and Peter Mullan. I think that was my intro to Peter Mullan. There's like a million I could talk about, and I have talked about Session 9 for many hours. So that's usually my go-to pick, unless someone doesn't want to talk about Session 9, in which case they are no friend of mine.
You just don't respond to the email then.
Yeah, probably. I would be like, no deal. I don't want to talk about The Conjuring. Like, fucking, let's talk about something, genuinely awesome.
Well, let's get into the background of the movie that you mentioned. I haven't done a shit ton of research on the background of the movie. The only thing that I do know is the main dude, Gulden, like, his backstory was inspired by some guy who killed his wife and then, like, took out all of her organs and staked them in the backyard.
Yes, Richard Rosenthal. This was in mid-'95 or thereabouts in Boston, and this guy, returned home from work, and his wife was cooking dinner, and she was making baked ziti, and she overcooked it, and for this is a guy that has no violent history, has never, he's just like a working class dude. And inexplicably, he flies into a fucking rage. He kills her. Then removed her heart and lungs and hung them on a stick in the backyard. And then he went to work the next day, like everything was kosher, and has no memory of committing the crime. Eventually he was caught, and I believe he's very much in prison now. But when this was like one of those out of left field, the grotesquerie of the crime plus the fact that this was by all accounts a very happy marriage before this, and this was not a violent guy, sort of captivated the imaginations of people in Boston. It was just so fucking horrific. And around that time was when Brad Anderson was also had taken note of an abandoned mental hospital he'd seen while driving through Massachusetts. That's the area he's from, and on I think it's Route 93 up there. At the time, the Danvers State Mental Hospital was still standing, and so he hired some. Am I going too far ahead of you?
No, please go on.
Oh, okay. So he, while this Richard Rosenthal thing is going on in the background, he also kept seeing this building and was like, man, I'd like to shoot something in there. I wonder if it'd even be possible to do it. And he hired some of those like urban explorer guys to take him in there and have a look around, and was like, holy shit, we don't have to dress anything. Like this set is already complete, And so we combined one idea with the other, and they ended up filming in the actual building. And by all accounts, that was a complete disaster because the floors were rotted and it was wildly dangerous. I got a friend, you know who Russ Fisher is?
I know the name, but I can't put a face to it.
He wrote for BMD for a while. He's been like a film journalist type for many years, but way back in the day, he worked on a few productions and lived in that area. And he's told me stories before about them like setting up a shot on one side of the building and then going through all the machinations of that and then having to move everything over to the other side of the building, which was not as easy as just walking it through, because you couldn't count on carrying that equipment through the route you would need to like get to the other side of the building. It was just so fucking dangerous. So they'd have to cart everything by hand, like all the way around that fucking building, which is huge.
It's huge. You really get a sense of the size on those aerial shots too. That thing is a fucking castle.
Dude, it's huge, that thing. And one of the bigger horror related disappointments I've ever had is that some years ago, my wife and I went to, when we flew up to Boston, and the plan was to go to Salem and then take sort of a winding road tour down to DC to see a Nine Inch Nails show about like a week later. And in that time, we went to a bunch of major horror spots. Like we went to Salem, we went to the Witch Museum and all that shit, which is pretty corny if we're being honest. But Salem is a lovely little town. We went to H.P. Lovecraft's grave. We went to a bunch of places. And we had wanted to visit Danvers, but they tore that shit down and turned it into condos.
Yeah, that's what happens
within the last decade. Yeah, it's I mean, I get why they would do it from a local government standpoint, but also like, man, it'd be really nice if I could go take a picture outside that fucking thing,
Something similar happened with me recently. Myself and the guy who just directed the movie I wrote, Sean King O'Grady, we have an idea for an asylum movie, and we mapped all this shit out. And he was like, you know what? There's an asylum in Michigan that's abandoned. It's fucking huge. What if we just rent that out? So we did a bunch of research on it. We looked at photos of the rooms and all of that. And then I just happened to Google something and read something that both him and I missed multiple times, which was it has been turned into an apartment building.
So probably can't rent it out, unfortunately. But yeah, those when a lot of those hospitals were built, like in that era when those were a big thing, those sprawling sort of institutions, um they were built to be huge, and they were built to be institutions and sort of large imposing buildings. And now that's just not the approach we're taking to mental health care anymore. You don't need a wing for shock therapy and hydrotherapy and like lobotomy rooms and shit like that. So of course they're going to knock them down and turn them into, apartments. It's depressing, but also like, because it's one of those things where it's like you'd like to see history preserved, but also a lot of horror went on in these, like real world horror, and so you can't get too mad about it. It's like, what is the beyond you wanting to take a photo in front of it? Like, what is the value to preserving these buildings where so many people's lives were just made exponentially worse by doctors who didn't truly know what they were doing?
I think it's a good thing that we have changed them. It's just from like a, I guess like a filmmaking or like a fan of Session 9. It's slightly disappointing, but in the grand scheme of things, I think it's okay. I think we will be okay.
Yeah, we'll survive. I didn't need that picture anyway. Someone whose uncle got lobotomized in there does not give a shit how I feel about, from 8 states away, whether Danvers is still standing, but an undeniably beautiful building on the outside.
It's so crazy to me to think that lobotomies were once a thing. Like, what could be wrong with this guy? I don't know. Let's just shove something up in his fucking brain.
Yeah. I've got an idea. Who has a pencil? I think they probably had success calming people down right out of the gate. And we're like, oh, then this works. We'll just poke you right in the eye with a stick.
Yeah.
And like the most barbaric fucking thing you can imagine, but yeah, over time I think they realized it was not so great. How does that work, by the way? It scrapes goes through the ocular cavity, and the idea was to scratch the prefrontal,
I don't know,
cortex off of the skull or something. I wrote about
I'm not
I
a
wrote
scientist,
something about this, but it was years ago. Yeah.
In my stupid head, I think, oh, maybe it hits like a reset button, but I don't know.
It's a permanent reset button.
Yeah.
So you're not entirely wrong.
Yeah.
You're not coming back from that. There's no fixing that one.
I love that this movie chooses not to have its cast be a bunch of like stupid drunken teens breaking into an insane asylum, because I feel like someone else would have written that to be the movie.
I think, I've met Brad Anderson, and I talked to him very briefly about Session 9. Not as much as I'd like to, but if I had to venture a guess, having not asked him about it directly, I would say that that's sort of the influence of the blue collar aspect of the Richard Rosenthal case. That, this was just a working class guy that snapped. And so let's maintain that. This guy had a wife and a kid, which means they're not going to be teenagers right out of the gate. And you're right. It creates a way more interesting story. The dynamics between these characters. And like, I believe these guys as a team of, hazmat suit wearing, I don't know. What do you call them?
Like, I don't know. They look like astronauts.
Yes, they do. It's that's my guess. That's why it didn't play out like that. And I think Brad Anderson he's made some very good movies. He's made some bad movies, but in general, I'm a big fan of the guy, and I think he's just sort of, especially earlier on in his career, he was trying to elevate certain genres. Like he had only made 2 movies before Session 9, and they were both romantic comedies. He did Next Stop Wonderland and Happy Accidents, and then Session 9. It's in both of those in the case of both of those movies, he was also trying to bring a little more, I don't know, just a little more quality and I think a little more depth to like the rom-com genre. And I think he succeeded. Those are perfectly good rom-coms.
I haven't seen it.
Next Stop Wonderland is particularly good.
Does anyone get like a giant piece of metal shoved into their brains in those movies?
Yes, Gwyneth Paltrow.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, it's great. And they keep repeating the scene throughout. It's an odd choice for a romantic comedy, but I think they make it work.
I I think this movie falls into the same category as a movie like Alien, meaning both movies are about working class people doing jobs, and
Hmm.
you don't. That's not as common as you think. I think in horror movies, there's so much focus on someone doing a physical job, and there's something really satisfying about watching someone on screen doing a job correctly.
Yes, that's true. I would agree. When was the first time you saw this? Like when did you first, when did it first come into your life?
When I was a teenager, I was living in a hotel away from like society. I didn't go to school, leave the building, but I had some pals online, and one of them we would always watch movies like together on YouTube and talk about it via like fucking Yahoo Messenger. And she was obsessed with ghost movies, and she filled something about Session 9, and that's how we saw it for the first time via YouTube.
I via wait, YouTube.
Yeah, they it seems to be more strict now, but like I don't know, a decade, 15 years ago, they
Yeah.
had you could pretty much find any fucking movie on YouTube uploaded. Usually, you would have to watch it like in 10, 15 installments, like Session 9,
Right,
Cult
right.
1 of 15.
Yeah, they kind of abandoned that movie after, it came out like weeks before September 11th happened. And no one was in the mood for this shit, when it came out. It also never played more than about 60 theaters in the country, but they just kind of dropped it like a hot potato. And in fact, like that's how I first found it. It must have been It must have been about 2003, and my girlfriend at the time and I lived together, and we had a thing where we would just go to Blockbuster and go to the horror section um, uh, or the new release while looking for new horror stuff and just rent it, whatever it was, and just give it a shot, which, as I'm sure I don't need to tell you, is like that's like playing movies like scratch tickets. One out of every five is going to be a winner at best. Um, and we just like the cover box. We like the little chair and the like. What is this about? Mental hospital, okay. And it just galvanized us. And it was like a thing where we were then renting it all the time and like showing it to people. And that's that's how I discovered it. It was completely by accident on a shelf at Blockbuster.
It seems to have grown quite a following now, though, right? I would say.
Yeah, it's one of those movies where I feel like there's a number of people on social media, myself included, and uh, and within the horror community specifically that are uh, about my age, who are like just raving fans of this movie and have been recommending it for years. And I feel like over time, more and more people have discovered it, and more people have discovered that it's incredible. Um, and so it does have a following now, and I think that's really cool. I'm always happy to meet a fellow Session 9 fan.
I assume after this podcast goes live, it's gonna fucking get a re-release on Criterion.
We can only hope. We can only hope. I was after Daniel Danger, the artist Daniel Danger. He's worked for Mondo, and he does a lot of gig posters for, he's worked for Bruce Springsteen and Nine Inch Nails and all kinds of motherfuckers. Um, and I've been friends with him for years and had been on him for a very, very, very long time about doing a Session 9 poster. And he was just like, yeah, I've never even seen that. I don't know what this is. And I'm like, man, this is in like your neck of the woods, this building. And I'm like telling him the backstory. He's like, right. I'll check it out. And then after like 2 years of haranguing him, he finally saw this thing and was like, oh man, this is really good. And it was a year or two after that, I think, that just out of the blue, he sent me like his preliminary sketch for a Session 9 poster. And it absolutely did not look like what I thought it was going to look like. Daniel has built a career on drawing creepy houses and creepy trees and, that quintessential sort of New England look. And so I naturally expected him to create a poster that was the front of the building. That's like way in his wheelhouse. Turned out no, it's like the image is like a shot up the hallway where the chair is, when you can see a little guy in the distance, and you can see the reel to reel thing that the session tapes play out on in the movie. It's fucking rad. It was worth the wait. If you're a fan of Session 9, I would direct you to tinymediaempire.com, because I think he still has a few copies of that, and they're just gorgeous.
Oh shit, I'm gonna pick up a copy. That's awesome.
Yeah.
This movie itself just looks really fucking cool, I think. I mean, I don't think enough spooky movies take advantage of daylight, and this is straight up a daylight movie, and it makes it play so cool.
Yeah. If this whole movie were at night, it wouldn't be nearly as effective.
No, especially when we get those outside shots. I mean, I think a lot of movies would have just stayed inside the whole time, but it's really cool. We get to see them, like, lounging outside, having lunch. We get to see them on top of a really fragile-looking roof that it looks like it's about to fall down any second.
Yeah. There's a story Peter Mullan tells. I'm sure you heard him talk about this on the DVD bonus features or something, where when they were up there filming that, he was like in between shots and just kind of like looking over the edge and heard a voice in his head that was just like, jump.
Yeah.
Like, that's fucking, he was convinced that location was haunted in some way. Like there was some sort of psychic connection happening there between the building itself and the people that were on site. And I totally believe it.
Yeah, unless it was just like fucking Caruso behind him with spilling jump.
He's such a rascal.
Yeah.
Playing pranks, David Caruso.
One Caruso thing I listened to on the commentary, the director was saying, I think it was during the scene where Golden is telling Caruso about like how his wife won't answer his phone calls, and at that point someone's cell phone went off and Caruso got pissed, but then realized it was the director's cell phone, so he kind of calmed down and didn't say anything.
Every story I've ever heard about Caruso is that he's just a giant dick. Yeah, he's like got that reputation in the industry. At first, like back in the day, I kind of thought it was motivated by the arrogance of him leaving NYPD Blue to get into feature films. And then he made like a string of movies that didn't go anywhere. Like he did this one, he did Jade. Remember Jade? I
have no idea what that is.
It's like, that's like mid 90s sort of, when Joe Esterhaus was like the reigning king of trashy sort of erotic thrillers in Hollywood. And Caruso headlined that movie. Imagine like, there was Basic Instinct, and then there was Sliver, and then there was Jade. So thinking about it in terms of diminishing returns, Jade is not a good movie. It's just not. But that one was famous for having a poster where it looked like a lady was getting, someone was going down on her.
Oh yeah.
And that was like,
I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, that was like a huge deal at the time. Like, oh my God, this is scandalous. Cut to 20 years later, and Wet Ass Pussy is the biggest song of the summer.
Is that what WAP stands for?
Mm-hmm.
I have refused to Google anything about it, so I did not know. Wow.
Oh, you should check out the video.
Okay.
The video it's so over the top. The whole song is over the top, but
Jesus.
I remember seeing it and being like, it is irresponsible to be releasing something this horny in the middle of quarantine. Like, people are going to get hurt watching this.
The day it went viral online, I remember like getting on Twitter and seeing everybody talking about something called WAP, and I just thought, I don't have the fucking time to look into this right now, and I just clicked away, and I haven't gone back to it.
I like the song, honestly. I think it's a good song. And the video is good too. It's just so fucking goofy and overtly sexualized to a degree that's almost cartoonish. Excuse me.
I'm gonna watch it right now.
Yeah, you won't be disappointed. It's almost got like a, what did it remind me of? Sort of like Liquid Television from the 90s, or the Primus's Winona's Big Brown Beaver video or something. It's very plasticky looking and cantered angles and shit like that.
I think the music video has been removed from online, man.
What?
No,
See?
I found it
Too
now.
horny.
Yeah,
Too horny.
They tried to block it, but I found it.
They got enough problem with people in hospitals because of COVID. They don't need people that got too horny.
Okay, I see this really big-breasted statue is shooting out of his nipples. That's something.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, this is just like Session 9, man. I see the camera going down slowly a hallway.
Yeah.
And just like in Session 9, bronze nipples just leak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This is...
I don't think it's unfair to say that the WAP video was inspired directly by Session 9, and that's an exclusive we are breaking here today on your podcast.
Inspired by Section 9, which is then also inspired by Kubrick, I feel, because Section 9, it's fucking Kubrick inspired, at least some of the shots.
Yeah, for sure. There's some Kubrick stare going on in there.
Yeah, we have those huge wide shots.
Mm-hmm. His depth of fields, it's man, it's such a good fucking movie. I don't know why it's not as you already noted, it has been sort of embraced over the last decade or so, and it has gained a following, but I still think it's like top tier. Like if I made a list of my top 10 favorite horror movies of all time, I think it would honestly be in the top 5.
I can totally buy that. And as much as it pains me, I also can understand why, like, the vast majority of movie watchers don't vibe with it as well, because I think they're used to something way more fast-paced, and this is a movie that requires a lot of patience.
Yeah. That could have something to do with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It demands your attention, and it's sort of oblique, it doesn't. I remember the first time I saw it being like somewhat confused by the ending and having to rewind by 20 minutes and just absorb it again. It's definitely not like a Friday the 13th or something like that, where it's very simple. There's teenagers, they're going to get killed. There's a guy in a mask, boom, done.
Yeah. So much of this movie is just being sucked into the setting of it.
Yeah, the setting makes the movie. There's no version of this that didn't get filmed in that building that could possibly be better.
I love how, like, the setting also pretty much influenced how the movie would go too. I mean, there's no way you can plan out some of those rooms without seeing them ahead of time.
Mm-hmm. I saw on Twitter you were just listening to no, that was in my email. You were just listening to the commentary.
Yeah.
I haven't listened to that commentary in years. So, what were some of the more fun facts you learned while listening to that?
Yeah. Let me pause this fucking music video. I was. Did I sound like I was intelligent as I was watching that? I hope so.
No, you sounded aroused. Frankly,
I am fucking held as a rock. Okay.
Full mast.
Yeah, that's what I say. So the DVD commentary was just fun. I mean, it was really business-like just talking about, like, okay, this is how we made this shot. They focused a lot on how almost all the props in the building were already just left inside, which I know you touched on already. But it's crazy to me, like, the state shuts down this building and they just leave everything inside and just don't look back. They just think, something will happen to this building eventually. We don't need to take away any of these really spooky items just laying around.
Right.
Yeah, and the scene that we talked about when they were all on top of the roof, I know they were all kind of afraid it would just fall down at any second, even though they had someone say it was okay. But I guess during filming, they witnessed multiple times just like floors cave in and walls just break. So it wasn't unlikely that could have caved in. It was like a fucking 80-foot drop to the ground.
No shit. It's like the house from the Money Pit. You know, you take one wrong step and your like whole leg up to your fucking crotch goes through down into the next floor. Look, rickety as hell.
I would not go into that, man. I am terrified of going into an abandoned building and just falling down a fucking floor into some inescapable abyss, which is why I don't break into buildings.
Do you think a lot of buildings contain inescapable abysses?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think back in the day, back in the last, I don't know, fucking 20th century and beyond that, it was in every blueprint to include an escapable abyss. I don't know.
Well, this was the era of lobotomies, you know, so they had some wild ideas back then.
Can I tell you something? I kind of wish I could have one.
No, you don't want to do that.
Listen, I just in October I got the COVID test 3 times a week. Okay, the thing would go up my nose, and I really liked it.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about this. Listen, when I was much younger, in my 20s, I had a raging drug problem. A lot of which went directly up my nose.
Yeah.
And there were many occasions where I would have to unclog the works, you know, shit just gets, if you got a serious drug problem, and it's that kind of drug problem, your nose is a fucking disaster area. So I'd have to get in there with Q-tips and the like and fucking clear it out. It's gross, but you know, it's the truth. And so when I'm reading these stories, and I've seen the COVID test, like video of people getting the Q-tip for it. And I'm like, I could do this all day. I could do this morning, day, night, afternoon, and I wouldn't even blink. This would not bother me. It feels kind of cool that you can push this little stick, you know, back into your nose and it'll go that far. It's kind of interesting. I don't think I would hate it. Luckily I have, I haven't had a job for most of this year. We only recently got picked up by a network. So, mostly I've just been recording podcasts for the past 8 months, and, it requires me to do nothing but stay at home. So I feel like I've been keeping very safe. Haven't felt the need to get a test yet, especially since I'm not going anywhere traveling, you know? But I bet sooner or later I'll have to get it. And I don't think I'll be a baby about it. And I think I will enjoy it.
Yeah, it's not as bad as some idiots online will suggest. Oh, my brain was being probed. But, you know, maybe that's a good sensation. Maybe lobotomies will cool. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's you're getting a different result there in those two. But I don't know. Maybe we can bring lobotomies back. Who's to say?
I think that should be like a fucking Patreon stretch goal. Not mine, someone's.
GoFundMe. We want to bring back lobotomies.
I mean,
some of you got the COVID test and you had a really good time with it. And we just want to keep that party going. So come on down to our offices and we will ram this stick into your brain. And, you know, that'll be the ultimate COVID test.
You
And you're
know,
gonna feel great afterwards and not care about anything.
we joke about this, but look at how often something becomes retro and we pay a lot of money to experience that again. I could see like in 20 fucking years, like, oh, let's go get a fucking fake COVID test to relive what it was like in 2020. I could see that being like a fucking walking guide you could pay to do, and at the end you get something shoved up your nose.
That's the payoff. Yeah, I get it. I have a question. The first time you watched this, what did you think was going on in this movie?
I thought that the place was haunted and a ghost was just fucking with everybody, and it had possessed what's his name, Golden, into killing everybody. Which, I mean, I didn't think he was the one doing it until the end. Obviously, I don't know if that is predictable. Maybe it is. To some people, I'm really easily duped.
So you thought it was Gordon, like from the get-go?
At the end, not the whole
okay.
time. I'm
Well,
saying
yeah.
I didn't know, but perhaps someone else could have easily guessed that. I don't know. Did you? What did you think?
No, definitely not. Like I said, I had to rewind the ending the first time I saw it and sort of reabsorb it. But it's interesting that the movie is set up in such a way that it really does not make it clear until the very end. Like, it's not like the beginning of a third act reveal where, that's the bad version of this movie, where at the end of the second act, you realize that Gordon is the guy that's been doing this. And so now it's him like kind of stalking the other guys in the hospital and killing them off one by one. There's none of that shit. That is what's going on, but it's not presented in that classic way. And I really didn't know what to think. I didn't know how it was going to pan out, and that's one of the reasons I liked it so much. And showing it to first timers, none of whom I hope are listening to this because we're just spoiling the shit out of it, is such a pleasure. Because in my experience, most people don't really understand what's going on until the bitter end.
They do such a good job of making us think that it could possibly be Caruso doing it all too, until like the last few takes, man.
Yeah, they even, like, there's that scene where Gordon and what's Caruso's name in the movie?
I have no idea. I just watched
Caruso.
it too. Yeah.
We're just gonna call him Caruso. Phil, that's his name. When Gordon and Phil, like, Gordon goes back to that one patient's room, which we ultimately find out is the woman on the Hobbs,
yeah.
Yeah, the lady on the tape that Mike's listening to in the basement. He goes in there and sees pictures of his own wife and kids and is like, what the fuck? And then Caruso pops into the room and is like, so-and-so said you heard him. Is that true, Gordon? And even then you're not sure. And then there's that next scene where, when all the bodies are laid out on the floor behind the clear tarps and shit in their prep area. And Gordon still shows up then. He's gone by that point, but like, he's now showing up as a figment of Gordon's imagination, and it's still not clear. I love how confused the last like 10 minutes or so of this movie are. It really keeps you on your toes for that last bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also love that Golden doesn't die either, which I believe was like an alternate ending at one point of the movie. I didn't get a chance to check out all the deleted scenes, but we just leave the movie with basically a patient left inside this building all alone, and that is so sad.
What's funny about that is in those deleted scenes, you'll see they filmed an entire subplot where Mary Hobbs was still running around the building. And it was a complete like red herring thing, but they set it up early in the movie where it's like, yeah, sometimes the patients break back in. This is all they know, so they come back to it.
Okay, so I was going to bring that up as well, and I didn't know it was Hobbs who was living in the building, but in the commentary, they did talk about a deleted subplot of just some homeless woman living in the building.
Oh, maybe it was. Actually, that makes more sense. Because Hobbs would have been too old.
That's also just a twist that she's a vampire.
Mary Hobbs is an eternal. Sorry, this is She's the only one. We don't know why God picked her. Very bad.
We don't.
But
I don't know if they talk about this in the movie itself because this last time I watched it, it was with the commentary on. But they were talking about how sometimes folks with multiple personalities, they will assign different sections of the body where that personality lives. Like, oh yeah, I have a guy inside me named Jeff, and he lives in my elbow.
yeah, right.
And that's why originally the last line with Simon, it was going to say, "I live in the gut," but then they changed it to "the weak and the wounded," which is such a better last line.
Oh yeah, it is. It's so good. I've seen that movie. I don't know how many fucking times. It gives me chills every time that line hits. It's just perfect.
Do you think when it comes to like these different personalities living in different sections of the body, who do you think gets to pick where they live? Do you like, are they designated to like the elbow? I mean, what if you get assigned to live like in the asshole?
Well, that would be unfortunate, but also I would assume that. I mean, we're speculating on what's going on in the inner workings of an insane person's mind.
Yes.
So
correct.
It could be quite literally any explanation for this. But I would have to assume that if I were an alternate personality being assigned to a body part by a criminally insane person and they put me in the asshole, I would have to assume that that person also knew I might enjoy it. Like I personally would not enjoy that. But I think that, to use your example, if they're sending Jeff down there, Jeff is probably, into being around buttholes all the time.
Reminds me now of that movie called Butt Boy. Did you see that?
I did. I was not a fan. In fact, I walked out of it. It was like one joke just playing out in slow motion over and over and over again. And my butt boy story is that I had tickets to see Parasite at Fantastic Fest. And one of the programmers there had been going on all week about how much I would love Butt Boy. And like, you definitely got to see that. Like, do whatever you can to see it. And at the last second, like 5 minutes before both screenings were starting at the same time, I traded my ticket to Parasite for a Butt Boy ticket.
Jesus Christ.
Because I was like, I didn't have any idea what Parasite was about at that point. I think I'd seen a trailer, but it was like, this looks. That was the last day of Fantastic Fest that year, and you've been to Fantastic Fest. By the last day, your fucking brain is wiped. You are a shambling mess of a human being, and I just thought, I'm gonna go with the easy option because I think Parasite is probably going to be a higher quality film that I have to pay more attention to, and I just need a thing that I can watch in the dark while, like, sucking on a vodka tonic, and not really think too much about it. And yeah, and then I ended up walking out of it like fucking 30 minutes in or something. I was like, this is fucking no. Every year at Fantastic Fest, there was one movie I walked out of. Every year I've ever been there.
The only thing I liked about that movie was the set piece of the actual asshole. Pretty gross looking.
I don't think I got that far.
Yeah, we get to see inside of it. It's like a fucking cave.
You say get to.
Yeah.
Like it's a reward.
Yeah, we get to it. I mean, if you can last throughout the rest of the movie, you get to see inside of a human being's butt.
My man, get a Brazzer subscription. They'll get you covered.
I don't see any way we can move on from the saddest confession of all time. So I think we should just end this episode now. How can folks find you online?
Well, actually, I do have one question on the subject of Session 9. Did you see Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark?
No.
Okay. There's a scene in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which I'm a big fan of that movie. I think it did justice to the material, and Andre Overdahl, I'm also just a big fan of in general. And it's the guy that did like Troll Hunter and
Didn't he do Jane Doe?
Yeah, Jane Doe.
I like
Autopsy of Jane Doe.
Okay.
And he's doing The Long Walk for adapting the Stephen King's The Long Walk.
That is my favorite King book.
Well, he's apparently still doing it. We're trying to get him on the show so we can kind of grill him about it. But he's I think he's a little busy right now. I don't know. Eric's been having most of those conversations, but there's a scene in Scary Stories where a couple of the teens end up in like a very old house's basement, and there's a reel-to-reel recorder, and they're listening to these tapes that were made of like a mentally ill woman being interrogated by, in this case, it's a family member, but essentially a doctor who's like trying to get to the root of whatever her psychosis is. And it is straight out of Session 9. Like the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, fuck, they're doing a Session 9 homage? This is badass, dude. Like I'm way into this. And then Andre and I follow each other on Twitter. So like the next day I sent him a message and was like, so are you a Session 9 fan or like, what's the deal? He's like, no, I've never seen it. And I was like, did your screenwriters see it? And he said, I have no idea. I don't think so. And I said, well, there's a scene in this movie that's straight out of Session 9. In fact, it's such a 1-to-1 that I assumed it was like an homage. And he was like, oh, I should check that out. And you know, he claimed, and I believe him. I don't see why he would bother lying about it. You know, that he'd never seen this movie, but it's so fucking similar. That's just a fun little bit of trivia for
Who knows,
stories,
man? Maybe Simon possessed him.
Could be.
Could be.
One of the writers on Scary Stories was living in someone's asshole.
And that's a good way to end the episode. What do you got to plug, Scott?
When you're hearing this, the following week on the Kingcast, which should be our Christmas week, we've got our main feed has a very, very, very big guest coming on to talk about on writing. And then we've got a surprise drop planned, so it's not so much of a surprise anymore to anyone listening to this. And then we have a commentary dropping on the show's Patreon that Friday, which is from someone who's featuring a guest that's been on the show already that absolutely knows their Stephen King shit, and we will be talking about The Shining.
Nice.
I'm not sure if we will have announced who the guest is yet, so I'm playing it safe on that. But the next few weeks of the show, we have really big guests lined up doing really big titles, and you can find the show at Kingcast19 on Twitter, on Patreon at patreon.com/the Kingcast, and you can find me at Scott Wampler BMD. BMD no longer exists, but I can't change my handle without losing my verified status, which in turn gives me a quality filter, which I will never give up. So I'm just stuck with it.
What is this quality filter you're talking about? What does that do?
Oh, it's amazing. Like I can set it to where I never, ever, ever see replies from anyone I'm not already following, and I follow a relatively small amount of people. And that's it. And so
Okay.
it weeds out, like, you know, and there's like settings for it where you can like, it'll do this, but it can also do this, but it can also, like, this is the nuclear option. And I've got it set on like full blast.
Hell
So
yeah.
unless I go looking for comments, and what I've discovered lately is that people are very angry and looking to pick fights over the smallest, most tedious shit. So it is really saving my ass right now. I'm also very block happy on Twitter. Like, if you just show up and mention saying something annoying, I'll block you and be done with it. Like,
you have
know,
to. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
I
not.
don't engage.
Yeah.
I don't engage with anyone. I try not to engage with people I don't follow. Because that has led me down some dark pathways, but you know, this sort of does most of the job for me. So I turned the quality filter off once to see how long I could last with like it being like wide open. And I think I made it 6 minutes and was like, nope, I'm out. Fuck this.
You have a Patreon too, right?
Yes. Kingcast.com or patreon.com/the Kingcast. And over there we do every Friday you get bonus episodes, and those take all different kinds of forms. The one we ran this week was a Stephen King trivia contest between me and the show's other host, Eric Vespi, except I didn't tell him that's what we were recording, so I sprung it on him at the last minute, so he would have no ability to prepare for it. I still lost, which I knew was gonna happen, would make it funny to begin with, because I'm terrible with that kind of shit. We also do commentaries, though. We do full commentary tracks, and we bring in a special guest to do them. We've done The Running Man and The Night Flyer and Dreamcatcher. They tend to be the not so great movies because those yield the funniest commentaries.
Right.
We do early access episodes. We do all kinds of shit over there. Basically doubles the amount of show you're getting for your $5 or $6, whatever we're charging.
All right, cool. Well, folks listening to the show, go fucking pledge. Do it.
Please do. And if not, just listen to us every Wednesday via the Fangoria Podcast Network on whatever your preferred platform is. We're on platforms I've never even heard of.
Like iTunes. What the fuck is that?
There's like every once in a while you'll get like, yeah, I can see the stats. I can see that like 80% of our listeners are through iTunes, and then it's like 16% is through Spotify and so on and so forth. And then there's like at the very bottom, like these programs I've never even heard of before. They sound made up or like a 30 Rock joke. And they have like 0.5%. And every once in a while, one of those people will pop up and be like, why isn't this populated on, listenwithyourears.com? And I'm like, I fucking, could you just use the ones that everyone else does? Like, I don't know why you're using this shit. But hey, as long as you're tuning in, that's all we care about.
And leave those sweet reviews.
Yeah, yes, please, because we've been we've taken a few lumps from people who are not happy with us shit talking the president we've had for the last 4 years, or well, sometimes like Trump shit comes up and we'll take our shots, because he's a fucking clown and he deserves to be mocked. But then you'll hear this is like maybe 15-20 seconds out of every third episode, and still we've gotten iTunes reviews that are like, this show is too goddamn political. How am I supposed to listen to a show about Stephen King, who, by the way, I understand hates Donald Trump and has been screaming about it for 4 years, but setting all that aside, I don't want to hear this shit when I tune into the show. And it's like, all right, well, good luck to you.
Yeah, Stephen King, who once wrote a book called The Dead Zone. Don't remember what that plot was about. How could they be so political?
Or the thing he wrote about guns, or the fact that he got blocked by Trump on Twitter at one point. Like, he hates that motherfucker, as well he should. And, but my theory is that there are people out there who are Trump supporters who are also Stephen King fans, who would also love to listen to a show about Stephen King and hear some of, like their hopefully their favorite actors or comedians or filmmakers or whatever talking about Stephen King. And to hear us mocking him is also sort of a refutation of their own personality and their own leanings. And it's like, they don't want to be reminded that, 99.9% of the people who've ever appeared on the show, and certainly Eric and I wouldn't cross a street to piss on them if they were on fire. That's probably an unfortunate thing to reckon with, but sorry, we're going to keep doing it.
I also feel like peeing on someone wouldn't really help the situation. If people on file, I don't think like someone peeing on you would even help anyway.
Well, depending on your stream, the strength of the stream, the volume that's contained in your bladder, you might be able to put out most of a fire.
Okay.
You know, I couldn't put out a forest fire, but if your head were on fire, I got you covered.
Well, thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
Okay.
Always in your corner on that one.
If you enjoyed today's episode of Ghoulish, hey, why don't you go leave a review on iTunes? Talk about it. Say, hey, I like this podcast. It was cool. It did good things to my body. Also, go buy the books we publish at perpetualpublishing.com. I publish books like Michael David Wilson's The Girl in the Video, Jessica Reynolds, Antioch, Pa Michael Anderson, Stand Alone. And I even write books too. My latest novella, We Need to Do Something, my latest novel, Touch the Night. You can get both of those at the same website, perpetualpublishing.com. You can also support the podcast and the whole indie publishing company at patreon.com/PMMpublishing.
Live spooky, die spooky.